Hey guys, this is Percentages Day 7. We are going to do some more of the remainder word problems today. So if you've been struggling with this concept at all, you're in luck because we're going to get a lot more practice in this lesson. I'm going to run us through a bunch of word problems so that hopefully by the end of this lesson you guys will have the hang of this. All right, Elizabeth had $120. She spent 40% of the money on a watch and 25% of the remaining on a pen. What percent of the total money did she spend? Okay, well there's my bar model, and I'm going to mark it at 40%, which is a little less than half. It says that she spent that on a watch. And let's mark how much she had originally. She started with $120. Okay? And then she spent 25% of the remaining on a pen. Well, let's just hold up for a second. If she spent 40% on a watch, we need to figure out what this chunk is right here. So she started with 100%, which was $120. She spent 40% on a watch. 100% minus 40% is going to be 60% right there. And that's her remainder, okay? This portion right here. Of that remaining money, she spent 25% on a pen. Okay, so let's figure out what percentage of her original chunk that 25% is. And we're going to do that by multiplying, finding 25% of 60%. And we're going to end up with a percent. So we'll cross cancel here and here. And let's actually cross cancel that 25 and the 100 too. So we'll divide both by 25, and we'll get 1 right here, and we'll get 4 down here. Okay, so that leaves us with 1/10 times 6/4, which is going to give us 6/40. And when we find a percent of a percent, remember that we should end up with a percent. So we need to use our method 2 here and convert this fraction to a percent. So let's multiply it by 100/1, and we'll cross cancel those, and let's multiply that out. So now we have 6 times 10, which is 60, 4 times 1, which is 4, and that's going to equal 15%. Okay, that is not the answer to our question, however. That just gives us the amount of the original money that she spent on the pen. So I'm just writing that down so we remember what that percentage is. Okay, the first question on your note says, what percent of the total money did she spend? Well, if she spent 40% originally on a watch, and then she spent 15% on a pen, she spent 55% of the original amount. Okay, the next question on your note says, what percentage did she have left? Now, we don't have to go through this whole multiplication routine to find out how much she had left, right? Because we can just take 100%, and we already know how much she spent, it's right there, and subtract that from 100%. So 100% minus 55%, and that's going to give us 45% that she has left. And then the last question that you have is, how much money did Elizabeth have left? And now we do need to multiply. So we need to take 45% and multiply it by 120. So let's do that up here. So we've got 45%, and remember that she originally had $120, so we're going to multiply that by 120/1. And when we're working with these percent problems, we should definitely be asking ourselves, what are we going to end up with? Are we going to end up with an amount or with percent? And in this case, we're going to end up with an amount because the question is, how much money did she have left? So let's do some cross canceling, and let's see, I'm going to divide 10 and 12 both by 2, so I got 5 down here,
And then I've got 6 up there, and now I can cross cancel one more time. I can divide 5 by 5 and 45 by 5, can't I? 5 to 5, but divided by 5 is 1, and 45 divided by 5 is 9. And now I'm just left with 9 times 6, which is 54. So Elizabeth had $54 left. All right, let's do the next one. Shayla spent 30% of her $300 savings on a bike and 60% of the remaining on a ski pass. Letter A says, what percentage did she spend on a ski pass? Okay, let's draw our bar model. And let's see, let's take the information that we have. She spent 30% on a bike. She had $300 originally, didn't she? Okay, so we want to know what percentage of her original chunk did she spend on a ski pass. So if she spent 30% on a bike, let's figure out what this is right here. And that's going to be 100% minus 30%, which I'm sure you guys can do that in your heads. The answer on that is 70%. And then it says that of that 70%, she spent 60% on a ski pass. And we want to know what that percentage is compared to the original amount. So we're going to take that 60% and we're going to find out what 60% of 70% is. And we're going to end up with a percent. So we want to either use method 1 or method 2 to find that in the end, but let's do some cross canceling first here. Okay, now that's convenient because it looks like if I multiply 10 times 10, I'm going to get that denominator of 100 down there, which is great because we want to end up with a percentage as our answer on this one. And then 6 times 7, of course, is 42. So Shayla spent 42% of her money on a ski pass. Letter B says, what percentage of her savings is left? Okay, so if she spent 30% on a bike and we decided she had spent 42% on a ski pass, how much is that? That's going to be 72%, right? But the question in your note says, what percentage of her savings is left? So we need to subtract that from 100%. So 100% minus 72% is going to equal 28%. And then letter C says, how much of her savings is left? So now let's figure out what 28% of $300 is. And we will cross cancel. And now we're left with 28 times 3, which we'll do down here in the corner. So 3 times 8 is 24, and 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 84. So it looks like she had about $84 left. Okay, so you might be about ready to try the next two on your own. If you have the notes in front of you, go ahead and try those and then come back and check your work. Okay, so now we have Wyatt, who went to the store with $80. He spent 30% of his money on cheese and 50% of the remaining on crackers. So let's draw Wyatt's $80 here. And let's show that he spent 30% on cheese. If he spent 30% on cheese, that means the remainder that he didn't spend is 70%. Of that 70%, he spent 50% on crackers. And letter A in your notes says, how much did he spend on crackers? So we're not even finding what the percent of the original is that he spent. We are just going to go straight to how much did he spend. Okay, so let's find out what, first of all, 70% of $80 is. And then, whoops, I put a 10 there instead of a 1. And then we'll find out what 50% of that is. So let's cross cancel there, and let's cross cancel here. And 7 times 8 is going to be 56. Okay, now we know that Wyatt spent 50% of that $56 on crackers. And man, I guess this guy was really hungry. So what is that? What's half of 56? Let's cross cancel there, and we can even cross cancel here, and we get 56 over 2. So let's divide that. And he spent $28 on crackers. I'm guessing he was having a party. Okay. Go ahead and try this one on your own for sure if you haven't already. Okay, I went ahead and set this one up for us. So we've got 1,200 animals at the pet store. Here's my bar model modeling 1,200 pets. 55% of them were dogs, 25% of the remaining were cats, and the rest were fish. So of my original 100%, 55% are dogs, and then we have 45% of other animals. Of that 45%, 20% are cats, 80% are fish. So what we're going to do is figure out how many 45% is, and we're going to divide that up into cats and fish. So if we multiply 45% times 1,200, we can cross cancel there. And then if we were to do the math on that, 45 times 12 is going to be 540. So let's write that down here. Okay, we want to know how many fish there are. Of that 540, 80% are fish. So let's go ahead and figure out what that is. So 80% of 540, let's cross cancel there, and then let's cross cancel here. We'll divide the 10 and the 80 by 10, and now we have 8 times 54. Let's do that math over here. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 3 is 43. And we have 432 fish. Okay, now the next problem in your notes is a challenge problem. So you guys should give it a try and then come back and check your work. All right, now hopefully you guys have set up your bar model something like what you see in front of you. So on this challenge problem, Maddie had $300. She spent 20% of her money on food, which means that she had 80% left, right? Of that 80%, she spent 2/5 of the remaining on clothes. And then we want to know what percent of her money she spent on clothes. So you know what is cool about this word problem is when we're finding that percent she spent on clothes, yes, she spent 2/5, and that's a little bit confusing because you're not working with a percent now in that remaining portion, but it's really no different. You guys have been multiplying and finding the percent of a percent. Now we're just finding the fraction of a percent. And so it's exactly the same because percents are fractions. And so hopefully you recognize that. So let's go ahead and do some cross canceling. Let's cross cancel this 2 and 100 to start. We'll get 1, and we'll get 50 down here. And then let's cross cancel right here. We'll divide both by 10. And now we have 8 over 25. And let's multiply that by 4 over 4 because we want to end up with a percent. The question is what percent of her money did she spend on clothes? And so we get 32 over 100. And the answer is 32%. All right, friends, that's it for this lesson.